So this guy, Sam Bankman-Fried, he was born in 1992.
Okay.
His mom, Barbara Bankman-Fried, is a law professor and a huge fundraiser to the Democratic Party. His father is an employment attorney, some type of attorney. But Joe Bankman-Fried, his dad, was also a big investor in Alameda Research and
Hmm.
FTX, and really helped Bankman-Fried sort of get started. So he sort of came from very, receptive and supportive parents. Basically, what Bankman-Fried did is after he went to Stanford and got a mathematics degree, MIT advanced mathematics degree. From there, he went to a trading firm called Jane Street Capital.
Okay.
This was in the early 2010s. At Jane Street Capital, Bankman-Fried came up with this idea, and at that point, cryptocurrency in general was very, in its infancy. Bankman-Fried came up with this idea about buying Bitcoin in foreign markets, specifically in Japan, and bringing them to the United States and selling them on the American market. So this sort of buying cheap and selling more expensive in financial terms is called arbitrage.
Mhm.
So he's come up with arbitrage for Bitcoin. He goes to Japan, buys them cheap, comes to the US, sells them for more expensive. He did this for about a year and he made a lot of money doing this. He made a bunch of money. And what he did with that money is he created basically a hedge fund. The name of the hedge fund was Alameda Research. So Alameda Research came before FTX, but these two companies were sort of just absolutely intertwined, and we'll talk about how they sort of led to each other's collapse. Um, this girl, Caroline Ellison, worked with Bankman-Fried at Jane Street Capital, and they actually dated for a while. After Bankman-Fried made all of his money and started Alameda Research, he goes to this girl, Caroline Ellison, who, by the way, no trading experience, never been on Wall Street, anything like that, but does have, as well, an advanced mathematics degree from MIT. Tells her, listen, I got this hedge fund, you want to run it? She's like, yeah, I've never been into trading, but okay, screw it, let me do it. She becomes the CEO of Alameda Research. About a year after that, Alameda Research is making some trades, making a little bit of money because they had all that capital from what Bankman-Fried was doing, with the Japan, arbitrage.
Arbitrage.
Right. So what Bankman-Fried's next idea was, I'm going to start a cryptocurrency derivative exchange. Basically, all that means is it's a website, and at this point, there were other cryptocurrency exchanges on the market. But what Bankman-Fried's idea was that, listen, I come from Wall Street, I've done Jane Street Capital, all that stuff. It's not going to be sort of just buy and sell Bitcoin. It's going to be more complex, derivatives, different sorts of
Right.
financial instruments. So that's what he set up. Now, what people didn't know, and what we found out now as a result of the collapse and everything, is that as people were joining the FTX platform, putting their money into FTX, so they log in FTX, give your credit card information, give actual US dollars, and get back cryptocurrency. What Bankman-Fried was doing on the back end was that he was taking that money, and instead of and on the exchange, the customer's account would reflect that they have a balance. But Bankman-Fried was taking that money and funneling it to Alameda Research. So the bank, the balance sheet on FTX shows a balance for the customer, but the actual money, the actual token in this case, was being transferred to Alameda Research. So as a basic matter, this is just fraud. This is a Ponzi scheme. You're taking money from one place, a customer's money, and you're using it to invest money without the customer knowing. As a basic matter, that's illegal. Where it gets more complicated is where Bankman-Fried, so he's got this cryptocurrency exchange, FTX. And on this exchange, you can buy Bitcoin, transfer that Bitcoin into Ethereum, transfer into whatever you like. What Bankman-Fried was doing, though, was that he had his own token, his own cryptocurrency. It was called FTT. So same as Bitcoin, it's a cryptocurrency, you can buy and sell it. The problem is that FTT was entirely controlled by Bankman-Fried and his companies. So when Bankman-Fried was transferring this money from FTX to Alameda, he wasn't doing it in cash. he was doing it in his little made up FTT token.
Mhm.
So not only is he transferring consumer funds from a exchange platform to a hedge fund without them knowing, he's doing it in a made up currency that only he has control over. So he and his friends come up with this FTT token, and they're like, okay, we say that this has value because we're selling it on our exchange. And you consumers come to FTX, you put your money in, you got, let's say, $100,000 worth of equity. So I'm going to take $100,000 of FTT token, and I'm going to give that to Alameda Research. So now Alameda Research balance sheet is up $100,000, and so is FTX's balance sheet up $100,000. In between here, $100,000 was just made up out of thin air because he created this FTT token.
They should have called it the Ray. Call it the RAY. We could have called it the Ray. The Ray
You could have
token.
called
Because you could, and you would have paid in Ray tokens,
Yeah.
and that's exactly what the problem was. They used made up stuff.
it's literally monopoly money. It's literally made up money.
Now, was any of this stuff, Achille, on the blockchain, or was this just like an in-house transfer of funds? Because I feel safe with buying, Bitcoin versus this nonsense.
Yeah, you make a really, really great point, and it's something that I wanted to emphasize sort of specifically. The whole FTX debacle does not call into question the underlying technology of Bitcoin. Bitcoin itself as a theory, as a currency, is still fundamentally solid. The problem with what FTX was doing was just sort of run-of-the-mill fraud. It was, and it was made possible by the fact that cryptocurrencies, you can make up your own tokens. It made it easier. But what he was doing was taking funds from one entity and fueling another entity without letting his consumers know. Now, the fact that it was done in Bitcoin is, it was done in cryptocurrency is one aspect of it, but Bitcoin itself is not the problem.
Right. And that's, I think, what people are, you get this conflated image of people that don't truly understand what's happening. And it's complicated. And not everybody is going to fully understand what's happening. But it's not Bitcoin's fault. It's not Ethereum's fault or Tezos or any of these other guys that trade on the blockchain. This is something that was truly made up by this guy. So he gets this money from his dad, or who knows where this money came from. I personally think that there's some nefarious people.
It came from his dad, but he was making $25 million a day.
Oh, no, yeah, I know.
With the trades that he was doing to the United States and Japan. So you figure, you do the math on, okay, I can do 25 million. What if I get 9 other friends of mine to do it as well? Well, now you're making $250 million a day, or you're making the cut of 250 million, whatever that cut was, 10%. But if it was 10%, let's say it was, he would be making, that team would make $25 million a day. And if you do that long enough.
Yeah. You have a lot of money.
It's exactly this team that sort of came with him from Jane Street and from MIT. FTX up until like 2021 was run by like 10 people. All throughout like the Super Bowl campaigns where you saw like Tom Brady and all these people like promoting it, the company was literally like 10 people. It was Sam Bankman-Fried, his lawyer, and like a COO. And they ran everything. And that kind of, and we'll get to sort of like after the collapse, the fact that this whole thing was just run by Bankman-Fried, it allowed him to basically, we think right now, this is a theory, that he's basically stole about $500 million from FTX, and no one really knows where it's gone. So in those bankruptcy filings that this guy Ray's has put out, he's like, listen, so there's all this fraud that happened, and all that is its own thing. But also, ever since the collapse, which really happened on November 11th-ish, since that time, someone stole $500 million from the company.
$505 million was missing from this when there was 600 million left, by the way. When they knew there was 600 million left liquid, someone went in and stole $505 million of that 600 million.
Wasn't it suspected, Rob?
It's got to be an inside job, right?
So you have all these news people being like, so what? It's got to be an inside job. It must be. The whole system of FTX was 3 people. This guy Bankman-Fried, Neil Ashad, there's a third guy, but
Sam Tribuco.
There you go, Tribuco.
Yeah,
those 3 people entirely controlled the source code of FTX. they could go into FTX and change like prices. They could fundamentally change what was shown on the platform. So when all of this money was deposited into FTX, they had full control over it. They could do whatever they want.
Didn't they say at one point that the Bahamian government had infiltrated FTX and was pulling money out of there? Was that ever dispelled, or does no one like they were using white hat hackers to do it?
Well, they did say as of yesterday, they did say that there is an investigation in the Bahamian government. Now, what that turns out to be, you and I both know, will be very subject to how much money they're getting paid.
Of course.
So yeah, this is very much still ongoing. So after the week of the collapse, FTX filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in the U.S. courts. And basically 99% of the FTX affiliated companies joined in that bankruptcy. 1% of the companies were held in the Bahamas. And I'm not fully clear on this because a lot of this is rumor, but a lot of people are saying that like maybe that $500 million was taken by the Bahamian government. Because like a week after the Chapter 11 filing in Delaware, Delaware is where a lot of companies incorporate, and then that's why a lot of bankruptcies happen. Excuse me.
Yeah, in Delaware.
Yeah, and the Bahamian government, instead of going to the Delaware court and be like, okay, hey, we're here too, we have a debt associated with FTX, the Bahamian government went to the Southern District of New York and filed a completely different case, completely different situation. And they're like, listen, we know where this $500 million is, or we think we know where this $500 million is, and we believe it belongs to us. So, you court, do what you want with FTX, but ultimately this money's got to come to us.
Interesting.
So again, very much ongoing, but it sort of created a diplomatic conflict between the United States and Bahamas, because Bahamas is like, well, we want our money, and FTX and the U.S. government is like, well, you got to file in this court, you got to be subject to our jurisdiction. It's a whole thing.
They love the flexibility of not having to go by the regulation of the U.S. Exactly, but they also want the protection of that. The protection that they want, like, this is my $500 million, I want you guys to get my money back for me, is kind of something that happens when you play by the rules. But they are living in a world where they don't need to play by the rules. They can make the rules as gray as possible around the white and black lines. They operate in that gray line.
I'm interested why he incorporated in Delaware.
They all do because there's tax advantages.
Yeah, but looking for asset protection in places like Wyoming or places like
just look at Amazon or Google. They're all in Delaware. They're all Delaware companies. If you Google them, that's where the LLC started.
But you were just Rob, you were saying something that made me think. It's Truman Capote quotes, like, the problem with living outside of the law is that you no longer have the protection of it. So you can't have it both ways. But the thing about Delaware incorporation, a lot of companies do it. Exactly. Amazon, Apple Computers, everything is incorporated in Delaware. There's reasons for that. Some of them are kind of old fashioned at this point. You don't really need to incorporate in Delaware, but everyone just does. So,
it's kind of like the thing to do. If you're going to be like a tech company, it's kind of like your first brand. Like, I'm going where Facebook started and where Amazon started and where all these companies start.
Incorporated in Delaware.
It kind of gives a little credence, like right when you start, like, well, I am a Delaware LLC,
You must be a real company. You're a Delaware LLC.